We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
What if the biggest challenge we're facing today isn't just division, but the trust famine that fuels it? Hey, everybody. It's Boysen. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast, where we explore the many ways to be a man in today's world. In this episode, I'm sitting down with Jeff Perera. He's the founder of Higher Unlearning to talk about the deep divides in our culture and the crisis of trust that's pulling us apart. Whether it's in our institutions, in our communities, or even in our personal relationships. Jeff brings compassionate, clear-eyed perspective on what's really happening under the surface, why many men feel isolated, defensive, or misunderstood, and how we can start building bridges instead of barriers. Together, we're going to dive into a concept that he came up with around the inner compass that can help men navigate these uncertain times. These are 4 guiding principles for showing up with integrity, aligning to our values, and doing better than we did yesterday. We're also going to talk about the hard but necessary work of change, the difference between real accountability and performative shame, and why the future of masculinity depends on creating space for healing, not just correction. This is a conversation about resilience and responsibility and real connection, and it might shift how you see your role in all of it. Stick around. Welcome to the Mankind Podcast. Hey, everybody, it's Boysen Hodgson. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast, the podcast where we are setting out to prove, and I think doing a very fine job, that there is indeed more than one way to be a man. Now, Brandon and I argue about this, but I say that we're kind of complexifying and making more complicated issues of masculinity and manhood. Brandon always says that we're simplifying aspects of masculinity and manhood. I don't know. You decide. Today, I am hanging out with a dude that I have been aware of for longer than this from Canada, from Toronto, Jeff Perera. And Jeff Perera is a founder of an organization called Higher Unlearning. He and I first ran into each other at the University of Massachusetts, we think, in a conference that was being put on by an organization called Merge, which was doing work around healthy masculinity back at that time, and especially with interventions for younger people, teaching and training for younger people. Jeff, say hello.
How's it going, everybody? It's great to be with you.
Great to be back. Also, this, I think, is your second time on the podcast.
Yes, yeah. Brandon and I think it was during the pandemic, we got to chop it up and talk a bit. So it's great to now get an opportunity with you. Very cool.
In maybe a different time here that we're living in. So let me tell you a little bit more about Jeff. Jeff Perera is a renowned expert speaker and facilitator who's been talking to audiences across North America, Turtle Island, since 2008 about building bridges across differences, helpful versus harmful ideas of manhood, and men striving to be allies toward gender equity. Jeff started Higher Unlearning as an online space to share his written pieces, videos, and TEDx talks exploring how men can be part of change by being the lesson in action. So Jeff and I have talked a couple of times to kind of set ourselves up for this conversation a bit. Here we are in January of 2025. We seem to be living in some fraught times. And a conversation with Jeff is a good space because Jeff brings this loving, open-hearted, compassionate edge to his speaking about this. So what are we to make of these weird times that we're living in?
Yeah, it's overwhelming. You know, I think I think of this era that we're in as an era of surfacing. I don't know if we've talked about this, but I think, we'll go back 10 years, like what started surfacing was hard truths about ourselves. So the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, Indigenous realities for LGBTQ folks. And then what also surfaced was how we felt about it. We either kind of leaned in and said, I had no idea, I didn't realize how big an issue this was, or we leaned back and said, whoa, wait a minute, like, that's not my fault. That's not our fault. I'm a good person. We're a good country, and in those moments when we say, I'm a good man, we're good men, this is a good country, that's our opportunity to prove it. That's our opportunity to be who we believe we are. And the third thing that surfaced was what we were going to do about it. Like, people found out more, researched, talked to people, tried to build pathways of understanding, and people did the opposite. They doubled down. They got defensive, fight, flight, or freeze, right? And I think it's not so much that, obviously, with young people, they are developing and indoctrinating or growing their belief system, but it's not that so much that people moved into radical spaces, so much as that just surfaced about us. We started to realize that about ourselves. People felt empowered to kind of just say the thing and be themselves. And I think the example of that, the model of that, was Donald Trump. Now, whatever you think of him, I think part of the reality is that, he's one of many politicians that we look at and we say, well, he tells it like it is and he says it like it is. And I give you an analogy here. I don't know how many Harry Potter fans there are out there. I don't know if you're a Harry Potter fan, but in one of the final films, there's a scene where the villain and his huge army have gathered around Hogwarts, the castle, where all the wizards and the witches and all the the good people are gathered to defend and fight the good fight. And they've put up a force field around the castle, around the school, in defense. And the enemy can't penetrate this force field. And they're all gathered around. They're just kind of just thinking about what to do. And some things happen in the film, and there's a scene where a leaf kind of falls from the sky, and it falls in and out of where the force field was. And one of the villains kind of looks at it, and he just gently puts his foot through the force field, and he realizes it's gone. And they all charge. And the point is, I think what folks today have kind of realized is what's holding us back, right? Our morality, accountability, just do the thing, like that's kind of the feeling, and people have pushed through. So, in this time, part of that is because I think there's really been a huge trust famine. People have lost faith and trust in systems, in institutions, in one another. Yeah. And they've retreated into corners. And I think there's also a huge empathy deficit because we're in this place of fear of uncertainty. We kind of retreat to what we know, and we're looking out for me and mine. And sometimes when people say I'm looking out for me and mine, they really mean myself. Not even maybe immediate family, that kind of thing. And so we are in this era of what feels like an ocean of divides. And this is the time where we need to kind of build bridges. We need to create inroads and do that hard work. And finding middle ground right now feels really difficult, even with people we love. And that can be in person, but definitely online. And part of this the challenge is we are existing more and more online than we do in person. That's the way we a lot of our interactions, we text, we post, we create, how was your vacation? I already know because I saw your pictures on Instagram or your, whatever platform you use. So finding spaces for common ground, meeting each other halfway is so vital, but it feels impossible right now, or at least very difficult. And I think part of it is developing the tools to do that together.
So I think that something that you just said kind of triggered a reality in me. And first of all, I want to own, you talked about the pendulums. We've talked about this kind of pendulum swing, and we're in more and more divided places, right? And I want to make that very broad macro, very personal, right? Because that's me too. That is in me too, right?
Yeah.
That pendulum swing happens in my own traveling through the world, confronted with the realities of the difficulties that we have. And I believe that a lot of people that I've been reading and talking about 2025 with, that's the reality of our day-to-day, right? There's an urge in me to pull way back, and it's just me and mine, right? Protect, put up the walls, boundary, cut ourselves off, protect me and mine. And this other urge at the same time that it's like, holy shit, in order to survive, we have to be reaching out. We have to be connected to others. There is no independence. Like, I intellectually know there's nothing I don't exist independent of other people. Our reality is interconnected. Sure as hell, I am reactionary on the day-to-day about, it's like, no, screw all that. Just this, just us, protect ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're a very passionate person. I think a lot of us, our passions, again, have come to the surface. And I think, again, this language, like an era of uncertainty, it feels like stepping out of the pandemic period. A lot of things have accelerated. A lot of things we've tried to avoid dealing with have kind of come to the surface. And, for me, part of this is this thing of facing hard truths. And the way we think of it is like, right, the other side has to face hard truths. They have to accept reality. It's like, no, that's also us. Like, it's us, mourning the idea of who we thought we were as a nation, as people, going through that grief and finding ways forward. And I think part of it is, we're at this place where it's not just the divides. It's almost like we're living in alternate realities. And that's part of the wake up.
That's it.
Right?
Yes.
Right. So how do you move forward when we don't have 2 feet in the same shared reality? It's like we have 1 foot in the same reality and another foot in our own version, our own dimension of what we think is right or wrong, what we think the problem is. And so I saw this quote, Charles Kettering, he's the creator of the electric starter for your automobile.
Okay.
And he said, a problem well stated is a problem half solved. So I think part of it is like being able to step back and say, well, what is the situation here? What is the problem?
What's the problem? Yes.
And part of it is, how do we do that when we literally live in different worlds, different alternate realities, at the same time sharing a common reality. Like we can, how many times have you talked to someone that you assumed thought a certain way and you kind of go, or it could be like your favorite celebrity or, someone that's been in your life for a long time and you're like, that's the way you feel about it? Oh, well, I don't like you anymore. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. And I'm calling myself in here as well because I know I do that.
Me too.
Right? It's like, my favorite musician or a sports figure comes out and says something and I go, okay, well, I'm done with them. And part of the challenge is that because we feel so disposable, we could have a whole conversation about what we call cancel culture, but this idea that, we put up this standard for each other that feels impossible to attain.
Yes.
And we've treated each other like commodities, like in a capitalist environment where we are commodifying everything. What can I use, take advantage of, hit a button, get what I want what I want, and I want it now. We do that with each other. Like, I want you to see the way see things the way I do. And if you don't, see ya, and so part of the challenge is recognizing that in yourself, seeing that in yourself. And that's a hard thing It's a hard thing to admit and accept, and it's a hard thing to work through because it's like, okay, so what do I do? And I think part of that is, I shared this this with you before, this idea of, being worthy and who is worthy.
Yeah, let's talk about that. There's kind of a purity culture kind of, and worthiness are kind of wrapped up together. Yes.
Yeah, like there's this perfection, and it's an impossible standard. If we're talking about men, for example, in the Me Too movement, I think so many things came out of that for men. Facing a hard truth about ourselves, but also, is that true of all of us as men? And what are you asking of us? Because I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. And in the spectrum of behavior that's disappointing, hurtful, and harmful, disappointing is like telling a really offensive joke at a house party, hurtful is, I think, all of us in relationships at some point in our youth, even today, can be hurtful. Saying something hurtful, not being present, not taking part in like being an equal partner, and all the way to the spectrum of harmful.
Yes.
And then destructive. And then we think of the names we think of, the Weinsteins, the Cosbys. Now we think of Neil Gaiman in the news recently, Sean Puffy Combs, right? And the problem is that when we talk about a man being problematic, we put them all in the same box and we go to the deep end of the pool, and we feel we're being compared to the worst of the worst. And then you feel you've been disposed, you feel you've been canceled, etc., because you said something that somebody found offensive, online or in person, and someone dismisses you or disconnects from you. Or we talk about, these standards, and it's like, again, like I said, I've done things, I've been a certain way. And what's beautiful is that I think in spaces of faith and creed, religious spaces, there is an opportunity for redemption, and kind of wiping the slate clean, etc. But I think in general, there needs to be conversations of, if we want people to change, we have to accept that they're going from one stage to another. Yeah. And whether it's growth in their awareness of an issue, we all remember when we didn't know and we had to learn, and now we know better, and now we're hopefully trying to do better and offering each other that grace. But it's also earning that grace. I think that, if we want to talk about accountability, that's a two-way street. I can't just ask someone to be accountable. I've got to model it, and I've got to be accountable in the way we interact with each other,
And there's a stating the problem issue there too. One of the things that we talk about in the Mankind Project with accountability is, the first question around, okay, I'm coming to hold you accountable, Jeff. I'm coming to hold you accountable. And the first question is, oh, did we have an agreement? Right? Because if you come to me to hold me accountable and I had no agreement to do, be, or say, or, no agreement with you about how I was going to be, then you actually can't. You can't hold another person accountable unless there is some kind of understanding, shared understanding about an agreement. And I think that kind of contributes to what you're saying. We live in different realities now.
Yes.
So we have whole groups of people in our culture who didn't agree, or who are actively not agreeing.
Yes.
To kind of play by societal norms, to play into societal norms. And this is on both ends of the spectrum, right? Both parts of the divide. No, I'm not going to fit into your gender roles anymore. No, I don't agree that I need to be this way or this way or this way.
Yes.
Right? And then on the other side, it's, no, I don't agree that I have to alter my language or my way of treating you in order to, be a valid person. And instead of the long, slow, deliberate, graceful,
open-hearted conversations that we need to have toward those things, we've got the void. And it's just like, you didn't meet my thing? Bam, red button. You're in the void.
Yes.
On.
Yes. And I think this is the part of the, if you want to call it, the grieving process we're in right now, because I think people are kind of realizing, just how uphill a climb this is, because what we're talking about is real gardening work, like doing the real gardening work to dig up the soil, dig up the weeds, and to plant something good and nurture it and grow it. And we live in an era where it's just, hey man, I'm just going to go to the store and buy a thing. I'm going to order it and have it delivered. So we kind of want that, I want change now. I want you to be this person now. I want what I want now, versus planting the seed, nurturing it, showing up every day, doing the hard work, getting on your hands and knees. Gardening is not, you can't do gardening in a pristine white outfit standing off to the side. You got to get dirty. You got to get in there. And that is, we're all exhausted. So it's like, you want me to do what now? And that's on a systemic level as countries, as societies, but also in our interpersonal relationships. We have to model that, like where we work, live, worship, study, hang out. That's where we have to do that gardening work. And it's tedious and it's slow and it hurts. Emotionally, your back hurts, the weight of it on your shoulders, but that's where the good work happens. But I'm there's no shortcuts here. I think that we have to start realizing that there's no shortcuts in an era where we're all, technology has given us so many shortcuts to everything, right? What we're realizing is that it's not necessarily, it's not blaming the technology. It's blaming us as people. Like, it hasn't made a lot of things better. Sure, it has on the surface, obviously, but we can't rely on the tool. It's us as people. And it's the same thing here. Like, emotionally, like, we have to rely on each other to do this hard work together. And part of that, I think, is if I want you to be invested in my conversation, if my conversation is, hey, you got to, think of families, or you have to think of trans folks, or you have to think of women.
Right.
If I'm trying, so for the work I do is talking to men and boys, right, primarily. So if I'm trying to engage them, they're meeting me halfway and they're like, well, you don't care about me. You're not invested in me. Where am I in all this? Like, you're concerned about women and gender, trans, whatever you're talking about. Cool, yes, bro. Like, go do that. You don't care about me. And so I think part of it is helping them understand, no, like, I am invested in you. I love you. I love you as men. I love men. And before I even say that, I need to do a gut check. Do I love?
Is that true? Yeah. Right.
Is that true? Right. So that means I need to do some inner gardening work. I need to do some digging up and thinking about this. Because if I want you to be invested in others, I need to be invested in you. Like, recognize your humanity. For me to get you to value the humanity of others, I have to value your humanity. There's humility, there's accountability, there's an understanding. Trust is being built. Like, these are slow. Building trust is like, I mean, think of it as a parent with your kid, like,
yes,
those times where you don't show up, you're not there. Like, even like a kid who's crying, like a little toddler that's crying, the parents don't pick the kid up. I mean, the kid is like, I'm on my own here. I got to cry louder. Like, they're not showing up. And how that plays out as we get older, it's like building that trust, knowing that you're here for me, that you care about me. And part of it is, you talked about accountability. Like, I know it's a hard conversation to have, because we talk about, like, behavior that's criminal, like how we have systems and ideas of justice, or so-called ideas of justice, carceral ideas. And that's a whole other conversation. But
yes,
this idea that we hold people accountable, we force them into accountability, when we know the reality is that all I can do is invite you into accountability. Right. Because if you still have that mindset, you're not going to change. I could put you in jail for 30 years. I can end our friendship, end our relationship. You're going to go off and continue to be that person. So the gardening work is planting seeds that hopefully find a root, maybe not in front of you, but maybe 10 years down the line, planting seeds that start to grow where it's an invitation into accountability.
Right.
You know, rather than saying you got to do better, it's like, what could be better? What could be different? And the person wanting to do that work because they're invested. If I'm invested in you, you'll be invested in hearing what I have to say. And because I want you to get invested in this conversation. I want you to believe in it, to buy into it, and to truly want to be accountable. And so, you know, that kind of changes the way we think of this discourse and these conversations, because it's not competitive. It's not me against this other person. It can be me against the problem. And then it can be us against the problem. Easier said than done, though. Like
way easier said than done. Yes.
Yeah, we can make it sound all buttery and, you know, as dreamy as we want, but it is hard. And I'm still learning how to do it too.
And I'm loving the metaphor. I'm loving the metaphor of gardening and planting and sowing seeds. And I notice in me self-ownership, self-accountability, right? So there are some folks who, you know, I'm inviting into a conversation. I'm trying to nurture the soil around them. And what I get back is some kind of negativity, some kind of something, some kind of whatever offense it is that I get back. And, you know, at my worst, I'm going to like put freaking salt onto the soil.
Yes.
Around them, around their seed, right? I'm going to cut them off from sunlight, stop watering them, and put salt on the soil. And we're doing that to each other all the time, right? That's like, my plants downstairs, if I want to nurture my plants and I've got a brown leaf or I've got leaves or dying stuff or it's how can I actually take more care, put more effort in, put more love and attention into that plant that's doing poorly, that human being next to me that's struggling.
Yes.
That human being next to me, or that group of human beings that's asking for recognition, that's asking for respect, that's asking for accommodation, like whatever that is, right? Is cutting them off the most effective way to do the work. And and it's not. And then I have to look at the hard stuff in me, right? What's most despised in myself that I am projecting out onto other people and not willing to face. Yeah, that freaking self-loathing that leads me to dismissing others is just nasty.
Yes. And I think, you know, the other piece of this too, to kind of continue the gardening conversation.
Yeah, we got it.
I don't know if you're a green thumb. I have no green thumbs. There's nothing I
do
green
have
food,
a green thumb.
Okay,
yes.
There you go. So you can speak to this authentically. You can speak to this. But I think the other piece too is, you know, the gardening tools that we have. Like if we think of we have a tool belt of gardening tools, the way we handle everyday interactions, you know, the impact we have in the world. For a lot of us, what tools do we have and what do we need? Like there's tools to kind of rip the soil up and like just, you know, break everything down. But you also need the tools to kind of rebuild, or in this case, you know, to plant the seeds and to start to grow and nurture something. And when we think of men, like I use a tool belt analogy in another way. Like for us as men, the emotional tool belt, and for a lot of us, the only tool we give each other permission to have is a hammer.
We're thrilled to have
and that's kind of how we
BetterHelp
solve
as a
problems
sponsor for the Mankind
in friendships,
podcast.
relationships, romantic
BetterHelp
relationships.
matches you with a licensed
I'm not even
therapist
talking about
for
physical
live
violence.
one-on-one
Even just like that
sessions,
energy,
someone
the
trained to
anger,
listen,
the frustration,
support, and offer helpful insights.
and how
if getting one-on-one
we need to
support
develop
feels like a good direction for
like
you, I invite you to
a
check it
diverse
out.
set of tools to handle different things,
BetterHelp.com/mankind
sandpaper, screwdrivers,
10%
right?
off
Whatever it
your
is. And
first
like
month
with
of
gardening,
therapy.
there's other ways that you approach challenges and problems, and ripping up dead soil and nurturing the soil. And that is part of the conversation here, because that means I can't just talk the talk. I got to walk it. I have to be developing those tools. I can't just be asking people to change. I've got to model change. That means like looking within myself and saying, well, where do I need to grow? What skills do I need to work on and develop and nurture and also value, right? Valuing these pieces. Because I think in a lot of our progressive spaces, we're really good at naming and shaming and blaming. And I'm not shaming anyone for that. Like, I think there's times where we need to, yes, call things out. And it's at the point where every approach has been taken. You have to take the measure of publicly calling something out, someone out. But we need to have more than that, more tools than that, more approaches than that. We need to have a diversity of those things. And I think that, the way we think of change, I think you could think of it like a vehicle, right? And a vehicle's made of different parts. And, some of us are the brake pads, some of us are the steering wheel, some of us are part of the engine. And we need all the different parts. And the problem, I think, is that we want everyone to be a brake pad. We want everyone to be a steering wheel. It's like, well, we all have our different ways we contribute to the larger effort towards change. Sometimes, we need the brake pad. And sometimes we also need this other piece too, this other component. So it's developing that in us internally, but also as a collective, having all these different parts and approaches to address these situations, address these challenges that we're facing. And that's in our larger discourses, but also in our interpersonal one-on-one spaces. And I think part of that is, again, valuing that work, valuing those skills in one another. Because people, when you talk about stuff like this, people go, oh, what are you saying, hug a Nazi? Like, what are you saying? Like, no, it's like finding middle ground. Like, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that at the end of the day, if we want to move forward, we have to move forward together. We can't go off in our little tribes and it feels like that's where we're headed. I mean, I'm saying that, right. I know that that's where we're at, Jeff. Like, I get it. Yeah. But, until we get people to kind of understand where we're at and where we're headed, it's about getting people on board. And part of that is finding ways for people to hear what we're saying, to embrace and jump in. And we talk about on-ramps, it's like helping people develop off-ramps to get off of a bad route, a bad way, but also finding on-ramps into our messaging, into our way of thinking, into our beliefs. And they need to be inviting. They need to be warm. I know people are like, well, why are we trying to coddle, if it's men or white folks or whatever it is? Like, no, it's like, think about it. Like, it's not watering down these conversations. We're going to do the hard work, but it's also got to be inviting. Like, I understand the tension. Like, what are the on-ramps right now for people in these conversations? Yeah. The conversations feel so tense. Yeah. They feel scary. You don't know what to say. You don't know how to share what you feel.
Don't know what will be met with when we bring forward difficult conversations, right? Yeah. I heard a fantastic analogy. I wish I knew who said it. It was somebody who works in childhood development, somebody who works with young people and, works with their parents, and the parents are setting these kinds of expectations and doing this kind of stuff. And he said, so when a parent comes into me, I say, no, go back outside the door. You need to do a backflip to get into this room. Well, I don't know how to do a backflip. No, I have expectations. My expectations are not changing because you don't know how to do something. Yeah. Go back outside of the room, learn how to do a backflip to get into this room. I can't do that. Maybe we need to start with a forward roll, right? And it's like, I notice in me and a tendency in kind of progressive left to we're expecting people to do backflips to get into our spaces, to get into our conversations, to get into, you just don't get it, man. You just don't get it.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I was going to bring this up earlier. So apologies to folks who don't like spoilers. Maybe fast forward 2 minutes here if you're listening. But it's so. I think I told you this. Yeah, we talked about this. So years ago, I'm talking like maybe 20 years ago, I got to see a play here in Toronto.
Right.
If you're a fan of horror, you know Clive Barker. He created the Hellraiser series, etc.
Yes.
And he wrote a play called The History of the Devil. And so here's a spoiler. I'm going to do a horrible job telling the story, but essentially the story is the history of the devil is the devil takes God to court. And, the devil's defense team is basically saying, all the evil that's happened, all the horrible things throughout the history of the human race, like, that's not my fault as the devil. Like, I just happen to be there. It's human beings, right? It's their fault. And the play depicts different periods in time, like fictional moments where, a person crosses a line and does something horrendous or heinous, and the devil just is kind of hanging out and is kind of like in the person's ear or maybe in the space. So long story short, the devil wins the case. The trial's over, the devil wins.
Wow.
And they get to go to heaven. That's the prize. So the production I saw, the devil kind of like walks off stage as if to enter the pearly gates and is off stage. And, you imagine them walking through, but then you hear a blood-curdling scream, and the actor playing the devil runs out to the middle of the stage and collapses to his knees, and he says, "It's empty. There's no one there." Meaning no one was worthy enough, and his punishment is to spend the rest of eternity in heaven alone. And I think of that story today, like what we're talking about, and it's a hard thing to hear, a hard pill to swallow. But this standard that we have for one another, this idea again of worthiness, like you might say, you're being a bit dramatic, but it's thinking about how people feel. Like how do we leave people feeling about these conversations? Where does it land? So it's not saying, hey, we're creating an impossible standard. It's saying this could look different. This could be better for all of us. This could be better for you. And I think one of the things when I talk to folks who have extreme perspectives, maybe they lean into kind of a male supremacy, white supremacy thinking. One of the things I ask is, well, how's that working for you? And how is that working for you in your life? It's we can talk about happiness, but is there joy? Is it bringing you connection? Is it bringing you love in your relationships? Is it feel healthy? You seem angry. You seem unsettled. You seem very insecure. These are things in my mind. I don't say that, but I can see that you're not happy with the way things are going. And is this way of thinking, is it bringing you closer or further away from the person you want to be? Right. And further away from healing, further away from, being the kind of person you want to be. But again, it's like, I have to model that. I can't hold you to that. I've got to model and give you examples of what that can look like. And that is even in modeling it, even in the way we have the conversation, because we can have a discourse where we leave and you don't agree with what I said, but you respect the way I said it, how I carried myself, how I valued and respected you and your viewpoints. Yeah. I actually listened. I listened because I actually cared, not because I was waiting for my point to flip what you said on you and debate mode and score points. It's no, I care, I'm invested in you. And that will go a longer way than anything I say, how I say it, how I carry myself, what I do, and how I do it. Yeah, but again, make it sound so easy. I get it. There's a lot of work that goes into that.
There's a lot of work that goes into that. So let's talk about We've used lots of metaphors here. We're going to bring another metaphor into the space, which is you have a model around a compass for an inner compass for taking steps toward being a healthier version of yourself, healthier version of man. Let's talk about your compass as we get toward the end here.
Yeah, I describe it as kind of like an inner compass for men. I think for a lot of us, we're trying to find our ways forward as a collective, as an individual, in an interaction, in a relationship. So I think developing an inner compass will help us kind of find our own way. We're so busy trying to find gurus and experts.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone, and that there is more than one way to be a man.
For men, the
and if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes.
What am I going to
Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us. So long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story.
Right?
So my friend,
so if I
pick
say,
up the
well,
pen,
I had
and we'll see you next
my
week.
intentions were good.
Lots of love.
We mean well. Well, I'm going to know that by the way you show up for the impact you've had. So if I had good intentions, the way I show up for the impact of my good intentions will the proof is in the pudding. So the way I show up for it, and if there's things I need to amend or take ownership over and think about, well, I need to work on that, I need to change that, and being open to hearing that feedback. And sometimes feedback is presented to us, on a beautiful platter. Sometimes it's thrown. It's like someone took the back of a garbage can and threw it back at us, right?
Yes, right.
But however it's presented, it's kind of taking it and thinking, okay. And then the fourth piece is to do better than our yesterdays. I think, part of the challenge is we talked about this conversation throughout about worthiness and feeling worthy as men, being accepted. And it's true for people of any gender. We're being inundated that you're not enough. You don't look right. You don't have the money. You don't have the accessories, you don't have the home, you don't have the family or the lifestyle. So the message is coming from society to do better. You're not enough. You're not enough. And then here we come, progressive voices who are saying, hey, you got to do better. Men, you need to do better. Right. And we don't mean it, but it falls in it all feels like part of that same onslaught, that same threat.
Yeah.
So when you have men who are already in a place where vulnerability to me is seen as a threat, right? They're going to armor up. They're going to man up. They're going to man up against our good intentions, right? So it's helping them realize that, when we say do better, I don't mean do better than everyone else. It's do better than our yesterdays. Yeah. Do better than the person I was yesterday. It's not that you're in competition with yourself. You're in a relationship with yourself as well. That relationship is the foundation for your relationships with other people. The way you talk to yourself, the way you think about yourself, the way you work with yourself, the way you would work with your child or a friend or a coworker or a partner. It's thinking about, well, how do I help myself grow, help myself nurture these things into myself. And part of that is acknowledging, here's where I am, here's where I want to go, and here's how I want to grow and do that. And I think those 4 steps can help us to navigate so many challenges that we're having externally, internally. And again, it's knowing that you're not alone, having other men in your life
supporting you on that
work with you.
Yeah, looking at the compass with you. I love this. Let's play it out in real life. So listeners out there, I'm making this up right now on the spot, playing it out. So determine who you are. Set your values, right? Know who you are. And so I have a set of values that I play through in the world, right? And then be who that is. And that can go either one of 2 ways. Either I am being exactly who my values are, or I'm being somebody different than my values, right? I'm taking actions in the world, either toward those values or against those values. And then impact step showing up for the impacts of those actions in the world. So maybe I have a value and I'm being that value, and the feedback that I'm getting about how I'm showing up in the world is negative over and over and over and harsh, right? The karma is going to pay me back. Karma is the oven. What I put into the oven is going to determine what comes out of the other side, right? Karma is the oven. So I'm getting negative feedback, and then be better than you were yesterday. That might mean going back and looking at that value and say, hey, you know what? This value of being hard all the time, when I act that in the world, I get negative impacts, and I have to show up for those negative impacts. Maybe I want to reevaluate my values. Or if I'm showing up living values that aren't my chosen values, and I'm getting negative impacts on that, then it's like, again, how do I be better tomorrow than I was today? Go back to those values and say, today I'm going to live to that value. And it's that subtle shift to realign myself toward a compass metaphor, my true north, right? Realign myself toward my purpose. I love how that plays out on both sides of it.
Yes, right, exactly. And I think that, we got all the metaphors here. We got the oven, the garden, the tools, the vehicle. It's amazing. But I think the work that you folks do at Mankind Project, and what I'm striving to do, is help people kind of see the picture, we can speak eloquently about the problems we see in the other, but being able to see it in ourselves, and again, like, thinking about how that lands for you, how that feels for you, because like there are people who get defensive, like, oh, why are you critiquing us? It's like, yeah, we need to be able to do that. We need to model what we're looking for in others, and it's in owning the way we do what we do. Like, really quickly, I remember I went to a training years ago around a bystander intervention for men, and the trainer had 3 volunteers come up, and it's a house party or a gathering, and there's 3 volunteers. There's a person who told a problematic joke, a person who's going to approach the person and take them on. You want to say call them in, call them out, like whatever the approach is, you're going to address the joke. And then there's a third person who happens to be there as part of the friend group, or just standing there, with their fruit punch or with their whiskey, and they're kind of like, oh, whoa, what's going on here? So you have the 3 volunteers, you play it out, and then the facilitator says, switch, and that's the key. Now you go from being the person who is calling someone out or calling them in or approaching them, which I'm not saying it's easy, but now you become the person for whom the conversation is landing for you. Now you're the person receiving the feedback, or receiving the criticism, being called out, and you have to sit with how that feels. Like, how does that make me feel? How does that make me receptive? Like the way the person's approaching it. So I think it's really sitting with, what's working, what's not working, the tools we use to have these conversations, and not being hard on ourselves, because it's like, well,
we're going to mess up.
Are we being hard on others? Right? Like, and as I get it, there are times where the conversation needs to be honest and firm and direct, but it has to be in a way where I always think we're planting seeds. We're not just ripping up the soil and walking away, right? Like, there's got to be more than that.
Yes. Not burnt earth.
Yes.
So this is, and I'm going to get us to the end here. One of my brothers in my men's group walked up to me, knows I'm an avid reader about all this stuff, and he literally handed me a clipping from 2020, from 2020, Yes Magazine, which was right at the beginning of the Me Too movement. And there's a piece from Tarana Burke, who was the kind of founder of the Me Too movement, originated that thing. And the question is, could a mindful masculinity freed from toxic notions of manhood end the gender wars? Can we build a better man? And Tarana Burke said, men's first and most important role in the Me Too, substitute any other movement in there, is as survivors. If we want less toxic men, then one thing we can do is create spaces for them to be vulnerable and have access to healing. So much of the dominant narrative is about attacks on men and manhood that it places men on the defensive. They think they have to protect themselves from Me Too when they can play a huge role in shifting the culture that props up sexual violence by listening to how much it affects the material lives of women and other men.
Yes.
Look at that.
Perfect.
It's here. The on-ramps are out there, right?
Yeah,
These
absolutely.
on-ramps that we're talking about are out there.
Absolutely. And again, it's like rather than trying to force feed these seeds into the tension of the conversation is like dry soil, dead soil. We're trying to force feed these seeds. It's nurturing the soil, nurturing the environment, creating the space where we can have that discourse so that when we do plant the seeds, they stick. And so that means like the ways we talk with each other, the ways we hold space for each other and create space to have these conversations together is where the seeds can then finally take root.
Thank you, Jeff Perera. Excellent. May that we all be nurturing our soil in ways that is healthy for everyone, right? I really appreciate you being here with me. And where should folks look for you out there in the world?
Well, if you look me up online, Jeff Perera. You can just look up Higher Unlearning as well. I'm on the different platforms, whatever social media platforms exist by the time you hear this. I'll be there.
God.
Yeah.
There it is again. There it is again. We live in uncertain times. Look for links in the show notes. Jeff, thank you for being here. I can't wait to have you back again.
Thanks so much.
Hey, it's Boysen. On the Mankind podcast, we've brought some incredible guests on to talk about the importance of doing the work to improve our mental and emotional health. And here's the truth. Multiple times over the last 25 years, I've had the help of one-on-one work with some amazing therapists. For me, for my wife, for both of us as adoptive parents, and for our kids. The Mankind Project and Men's Group, though awesome, are not a substitute for professional mental health support. And so I'm thrilled that the Mankind Podcast now has BetterHelp as a sponsor for the show. BetterHelp works online. It asks you what you're working on and then matches you for live one-on-one sessions with a licensed therapist, someone trained to work with you, listen, and offer helpful insights. I'm using BetterHelp. It's super easy, and I like what I'm getting. If getting one-on-one support in the comfort of your own space feels like a good direction for you, I invite you to check it out. Go to the link in the show notes or betterhelp.com/mankind. And if you sign up, you'll get 10% off your first month of therapy.